here I am, you can tell, different outfit today, hair pulled back, makeup done a little bit differently, still janky ass setup, still, one day, man. One day we will figure it out. You might hear in some of the silences, there are people talking outside, there are lots of people outside. Anyway, so, let's address a few things. One, I have showed off a few other tarot decks recently. Tonight, I am recording Necronomicon tarot. Ooh. So, a few more things to address. One, might not be looking directly at you. Please understand I am looking at my phone to make sure everything's still recording and everything actually looks alright with regards to lighting setup and all of that stuff. Someday I'll have a better setup than this, but we work with what we got now. I will occasionally try to remember to look at you guys, but sometimes it's hard to get into that mind frame. I will do my best. I will do my best. Do my best, guys. But for now, let's talk about Necronomicon tarot. So, as you can see, this is in one of them big boy badass boxes. What does that usually mean? That usually means there's a guidebook in here. And yes, indeedy, there is. So why did I buy this deck? I bought this deck because I was out shopping one day, and I saw it, and for some reason I had it in my head that this was like a difficult tarot deck to find. I was wrong, but I got it anyway because, well, I had wanted to get something for myself that day, and what do I normally get? I normally get myself a tarot deck. Or crystals. Or something. Clothes. I don't know. Depends on my mood. Depends on all of our moods, right? What we buy for ourselves depends on our mood. And I got this because I love the Call of Cthulhu by HP Lovecraft. I haven't read all of HP Lovecraft's works, but I recognize him as like the sort of father of modern horror, having inspired so many horror writers that we know today. I love some of the ideas of these old world gods and, you know, horrors beyond our understanding. Like, it does evoke a lot of fearful imagery, but I haven't read all of them. I do have like a beautiful leather-bound edition that I got for Christmas one year, which I adore, but I haven't read all of them, so I know there's probably a lot of gaps in my knowledge about Lovecraftian lore. I do recognize that Lovecraft is a pretty problematic figure. So, one of the other reasons I bought this deck was, yes, because I wanted to learn a little bit more about Lovecraftian lore and some of the different figures, monsters, creatures in the lore, and I thought this would be a fun deck to do it. But I also know that since I have bought it, I've looked through the guidebook. I haven't done too much work with it. It's kind of... I don't want to say it's a negative deck, but there are a lot of horror aspects to it. It's probably a great deck for working with the shadow, but I think you can work with your shadow self in a lot of different decks. And this one, I mean, yes, it's negative, but it's not negative in the sense that, oh, it's bad, but it's negative in the sense that, like, these are not images that I would work with people or myself with in order to try and heal issues or work through traumas, triggers, and conflicts the way I usually work with tarot. So that's deterred me away from working with this deck. But this deck is really cool for one of the, like, there's an aspect of this deck that I actually really do love. In addition to loving, like, the different Lovecraftian themes and lore that's in this deck, I love how they have done the court cards. So let me first say that I think the guidebook and a lot of the images also don't just revolve around Lovecraft, but I think they also revolve around the authors. I think the author of the guidebook has written some Lovecraftian stories, so I think that is also weaved into this deck as well, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I looked through the guidebook. But one really unique thing that I found I really loved in regards to this deck was how they did the court cards. I'll show you the court cards when we get to them. They don't say this on the actual court cards. You can only find it in the guidebook, which, let me show you. It's a horizontal book as opposed to vertical. Opens up like this. Can't see it too well, but they've given extra names to each of the court cards, and I think that's a really good way to help. It almost gives you an extra keyword to think about when it comes to the court cards. So let me pull out this deck, and You want to see this deck? Let me show you this deck. I'm not mature. I don't know why you guys thought I was mature. Let me take this deck out of the massive box, and it's not getting any better. But I will do that, and it obviously starts off with the Major Arcana, Fool Through the World. We'll start there, and then when we get to the court cards, I'll show you what I mean by the keywords. The Major Arcana does all list like different gods, deities, and figures from Lovecraftian lore. I think they all are anyway. It starts off with the Fool, which is Azathoth. This one's gonna be fun. It's gonna be real fun. Azathoth. It's the same issue that I think a lot of us have with the Thoth tarot deck. I pronounce it Thoth because it's TH at the start and then TH at the end, so to me it makes sense to say Thoth, but I've heard a lot of people say Toth. Like, oh my god. Azathoth is the Fool. I know, for example, the High Priestess is Bast. I don't know if Bast appears in any Lovecraftian stories. That's where some of my lack of knowledge of Lovecraftian lore comes into play. Either way, Bast is a badass goddess, so. But again, all of these are in here. Dagon, the Hierophant. I think Dagon's a pretty well-known figure in Lovecraftian lore. The Lovers, the Deep One, and the Bride. Definitely heard of the Deep One. I don't know if I've heard the Deep One and the Bride. I'm waiting until we get to the guy everyone knows, because y'all know our boy Cthulhu's gonna be in here, right? I mean, of course he is. This one, okay, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this name, because I know I'll butcher it, but the Death card is such like a potent image for me in this deck. Like, this is one of the ones that I was like, if I got the Death card, maybe that's what it is, like the idea of the horror aspect behind it. I love horror and scary things. Halloween's my favorite time of year, things like that. But in terms of reading tarot cards, so much of when you do your tarot card reading, so much of it is for personal guidance and insight, whereas I think mixing in like horror aspects like that for me would be really challenging for it to not feel like such a negative reading. It's a figure who is tied with his hands behind his back to a pole, and you can see it looks like his face has been ripped off, and like, it's the idea of imagining something like that to me is horrifying. I like it for, in reading a horror novel or watching a horror film, like, you could feel that, you could empathize, and you could feel the terror and the horror behind that. But if I'm doing a reading and I'm thinking about, the Death card coming up and the change that usually accompanies death, I think that would just freak me out way too much. And I think that's why I veer away from using this deck. As soon as I took this deck out of the box and I looked at it, I was like, I ain't never gonna read with this deck. I like having it as a resource, as to kind of look through the deck and see tarot told in a different way via the mythos of HP Lovecraft. I love that aspect of it, but in terms of using it as a deck to read, I probably never would. But here you go. Your boy Cthulhu. Everyone knows Cthulhu. Even if you haven't read HP Lovecraft, you know Cthulhu, and he is the devil. Because of course. Because of course. By the way, I didn't show off the back of these cards. It's like tentacles and tentacles coming out of, I don't know. To me, it almost looks like a manhole cover. I know it's not a manhole cover before you get on my case. I know it's not a manhole cover, but it looks like, you know, one of the old world gods coming back to life again. Ishtar as the star. You know, there's some interesting cards in here, and it definitely would be a great deck if you were a lot more familiar with H.P. Lovecraft and his work and his stories, and if you're familiar with Donald Tyson and his own works with Lovecraftian lore. It's probably a great deck for that. It's one of the perks about living in the world today. Like, there is no shortage of tarot decks and themes. So if there's a certain fandom or story or something that you love, you're bound to find something you connect with. So it's definitely a perk of living today. We're gonna start with wands. So Ace of Wands. It's kind of a, as I hold it up to the camera, I'm like, that's kind of a nice image. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, each of these tells a whole tale through the entire suit. And God, I wish I remembered more from the guidebook, but you really can see if you line them all up. And maybe what I'll do is I'll take a picture of all 10 of them lined up so you can see that there's a story that you can read from cards 1 through 10. And you can pause the video if you want to look at them a little bit more in depth. But I believe there is a tale being told from cards 1 through 10. But let's talk about the court system. The court system here is still king, queen, knight, and page. But as I was saying before, in the guidebook, they also have extra names for each of them, which I think is a really, really nice and unique aspect of this deck. So for wands, the king is also known as a lord, the queen is known as a lady, the knight is known as commander, and the knave is known as overseer. I think that's really cool because it gives a better idea of what each of these figures are. Like, if you see on repeat, you know, Page of Wands, Page of Swords, Page of Cups, Page of Pentacles, you can inherently understand what it means, but having an extra word there to showcase how a Page of Wands differs from a Page of Swords, I think is really helpful. I think it's a unique aspect of this deck to see and understand the differences in those figures. How does, you know, the page shift into knighthood? How does any of those differ from the queen? Again, a lot of people who have been reading tarot for years can sort of understand that balance, but having an extra word there can also visually help you see it and imagine it more. So you can understand, you know, how a commander differs from an overseer and things like that. Let me move on to cups. Now, I think cups is sort of telling a story about cults, if I'm not mistaken, the cult of Bast. And that actually, maybe that's part of Donald Tyson's inclusion into the Lovecraftian lore. Again, I don't know, I haven't read any of his work, and I haven't read all of H.P. Lovecraft's work, but I'll put up pictures of the 10 pip cards all laid out so you guys can see how the story plays out, where it starts, where it goes to, and you can kind of see it looks like these cult member figures going from one stage to the next within their cult. I was looking for another word, but it didn't come, and I just said I'd repeat the word cult, even though I had said it so many times. And then here, again, you have king, queen, knight, and knave. Okay, I think I said before it's king, queen, knight, and page. It's actually knave. I'm sorry about that. That's a goof up on my part. Goof up on my part. Don't worry, I caught it eventually before the video's over. So for cups, they are, the king is priest, the queen is priestess, the knight is monk, and the knave is scribe. And again, those ones in particular really strike with me because I can see that starting process, the knave being the almost the starting realm of the court cards, starting off as a scribe, and where do you go from being a scribe? You go to being a monk. But then monk isn't the top tier, is it? And you can see it and understand it better with priestess and priest. Like, I get it. To me, it's a more visceral image than the same name over and over again, in a sense. Moving on to swords next. I really wish I remembered this from reading the guidebook the first time around. I believe the sword story is, and I mean, we can kind of see this from the court card names. The swords is, it's mercenaries, I believe, assassins telling their own journey, but it's all interconnected and interwoven. It is kind of interesting to see a full story, like a lot of these figures in these cards from the pip cards, starting at card 2, but going from like 2 through 10, you can actually see some similar figures coming up over and over. So in a sense, it's kind of like you can really see their story being told, whereas in like a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, a lot of times it's not the same figures over and over, you know? So it's an interesting aspect to this deck. For swords, the court system goes, the king is an assassin, the queen is a harlot, the knight is a mercenary, and the knave is a thief. And again, I think that works really well. I know some people might hear the word harlot and think, oh, great, like, oh, you've reduced the queen to just being like I don't want to say the word tramp, but like, I know there are connotations with the word harlot that I'm sure other women, maybe even men, also have. But the idea of the harlot, you can see it from the image of her. She doesn't look like someone to be trifled with. Like, she looks like she's definitely someone who's more conniving, who has a plan, who stands in her own strength, and she may use her looks, her beauty, even her sexuality to get what she wants. And in a sense, it's knowing that she has that and can use it to her advantage. And there is in some ways brains and logic behind that, because she's using exactly what she has to obtain that which she needs. So while some people can take issue with the word harlot itself, it kind of works. It does kind of work, and that's something that I like about it. Then we move on to discs, and I believe discs, I think this story is sort of about necromancy, reviving the dead, at least in looking through the cards right now that are in my hands. That's what it kind of looks like. I gotta say, I really, really like I am just coming to realize I really like earthy colors. I'm loving the greens in this. Like, it just works for me, man. And this one, again, it has the same system in the court cards. Just to stress, you don't see these extra names on the cards themselves. The cards will still only say queen, king, knight, or knave. And looking in the book and seeing that extra name, that I think just gives it a little something extra to think about when you're reading. So for discs, the king is necromancer, the queen is sorceress, the knight is a shaman, and the knave is an auspex. I just think that helps. I would love to see more tarot decks like that have, whether you want to call it a keyword or an extra way to get more insight as to what individual characteristics for each of these figures are, because sometimes they can blend together. I just think it's something extra in the deck that I really like and appreciate the author has included, because it gives you, again, another deeper way to see those court cards, if you like. Anyway, I feel like this one was a little bit more, I don't know, I'm trying to be quicker about them. All these videos are lasting for a half hour. Even this, I'm recording for a half hour, but I know I've got some big gaps of space that I'm going to be cutting out. And I want to make them a little bit quicker, because I know it might be kind of a lot for some people to sit through a whole half-hour video. But that is the Necronomicon Tarot. illustrated by Anne Stokes, who I know has also illustrated a bunch of other tarot decks as well. And yeah, that is one that I will probably be donating or gifting or maybe even doing a giveaway of. So if you're interested in doing a giveaway on some of these decks that I've been doing quick unboxings for, let me know. I will see what I can do. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Anya out. Bye!